Welcome to Theater Therapy, a podcast for movie lovers who treat going to the movie theater like a therapy session. With co-hosts Aly and Ems, we geek out and deep dive into all things movies, including top picks, movie reviews, best soundtracks, our current hyperfixations, and more. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy today's session. Welcome back to another session of Theater Therapy. This week we are continuing our Harry Potter series and we're jumping into the fourth installment, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Quick reminder, this month's monthly movie is obviously Harry Potter series since we're doing the series as a whole.
And yeah, we'll just get right into it today. We're getting into the bigger books.
Yes, more content for sure. Like, they definitely cut out a lot more, or they changed things to make it like okay, not really simpler, to be honest.
I know, they kind of almost
made it more complicated. On some things.
In some ways, yeah. And in other ways, I think they solved some of the problems that the book created for itself, because as I thought about it, there's actually a few plot holes that the book created and then the movie just ignored.
Oh, wait, before we get into the plot, I was going to say this one has a different director again. This one was directed by Mike Newell, and then this movie came out in 2005.
Anyways, yeah, I was just, I read the book, watched the movies, and I was like doing a refresh session for myself this morning, and this is like jumping to like the very end of the movie already. But you know how Barty Crouch Jr., I guess. In the book, he explains, while under the influence of that truth serum
Veritaserum.
Yeah, that they give him, he explains kind of like a lot of it.
Yeah.
He gives you a ton of explanation for pretty much where he's been, what he's been doing, how it all came about.
Kind of why and all that
and
stuff,
the whole thing. And one of the things that he says is that, his mom was dying and she convinced her husband, his dad, to let her go take their son's place in Azkaban and get him free. And how they did it was that she starts taking Polyjuice Potion, but she's in Azkaban, and I just cannot fathom how, I think it says she dies, like, within the year or a year later of being there in Azkaban, and I'm just like, that's a long time to be in this, like, high-security prison.
And
how does she have Polyjuice Potion? How does she have access to making Polyjuice Potion? How does she have access to his hair in order to add it into the Polyjuice Potion consistently? Because they literally tell you that, like, they have to keep the real Mad-Eye Moody alive and nearby so that they're constantly making new Polyjuice Potion and adding his hair to it. So I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, I guess, though, in a way, if they were able to sneak her in and sneak Barty Jr. out...
They wouldn't visit it, though, so they would have to be making regular visits to give her the supplies. That's the only way.
Well, and then what's funny, too, is that they don't talk about in the movie is that since she was in his place and she died in Azkaban, people believe that he's dead. They don't think that he's alive.
And they never really mention that in the movie. They say he was still a prisoner.
And then they send him back to Azkaban, but they also forget to mention that the Dementors did the Dementors kiss, so he technically doesn't have a soul. And so there's a few plot holes along with him.
I know, I'm like there is. This is the movie of plot holes, I should say.
Honestly, yeah, and I forgot, because honestly, when I was remembering about it, when we were talking about doing this, I was thinking that the third one was the one that had the most differences. This one had more differences than the third one, for sure.
The third one, I think, is the beginning of them branching farther away, and then this one is just like...
I get it. Like, I get that you have to make things, like, fit... I mean, this book is 700 and something pages.
Right.
Fitting that into a 2.5-hour movie is kind of hard.
Yeah, so you gotta, like, speed it up.
Some things, like in the last one, they could have made a little bit more sense on Sirius's plot line. And this one, I feel like...
They disregarded him entirely.
First of all, Sirius is in this book.
Quite a bit.
I told you this because when we were starting to read this book, I was like, you're going to be surprised how much Sirius is in this.
Yeah, like, Harry literally, like, visits him. He's, like, writing him from, like, the beginning.
And all that he has in the movie is, I think they have, like, the letter at one point and, like, the fire scene, pretty much.
They have the one fire scene, I think.
When he talks to him.
And that's about it. And, like, at the end, like... Dumbledore even lets him come into the castle and stay with Harry while in his, like, dog animagus form. Yeah. So I'm like, where was this? You just completely scrapped his lines,
which is
like,
so
altogether.
Sad because I really love Sirius as a character.
Yeah.
Like, I do think that he's a well-written character, and I like his storyline and his arc, and just, like, and he makes sense to be in there. That's the thing. Like, the reason that he's in the book so much is because obviously he's a very important character, so I'm a little annoyed that they cut him out of the movie so much, because as much as, like, you still feel the loss of him in Order of the Phoenix once he dies, but, like, I feel like it's not as meaningful because
Right,
you don't
like,
get as much of his story.
You don't get as much of the time that they spend getting to know each other and, like,
which then
everything like that.
I'm telling you, the next episode for this, when we talk about Order of the Phoenix, there's going to be a lot to cover because there's a lot that's different in that one, too.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I've already thought of another plot hole. It's not like a major plot hole, but it just is like something that takes away context. Because in the second one, you know how, I mean, not in the second one, in the next one, Harry starts the Dumbledore's army. And in the Dumbledore's army, he starts explaining to everybody how to do all these spells. And I've already started watching, you know, the next one because I was getting ahead. And I'm like, you know, since they don't show any of Harry's practicing for any of the tournament in the Goblet of Fire, you're like, how, where, when, and how did he learn all these spells? But in the Goblet of Fire, in the book, you see him going through all sorts of practicing sessions.
To his broom, he practiced that with Hermione like a ton.
For a long time. And then before he goes into the maze, they practice all sorts of spells, and it's a lot of the spells that he's now teaching his classmates in the next book how to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when did he learn that in the movie? If you just went by the movie,
you'd be like,
you never see him do
like, wow, he is really, really great. Like, you'd be like, wow.
I'm like, you never see him really do any magic. And even in, like, the maze and stuff, he barely uses any of them.
I feel like that's one thing the movies kind of did wrong, is that in all of them, like, I get it. They're trying to make Harry seem like he's a little bit more special and, like, he's the kid that,
natural,
But, like, they make him seem like he can just do anything under the right circumstances. Like, in the third one, he just able to whip out a full Patronus charm when you only see him do it, like, one other time and he passed out. I'm like, because in the book, he practiced that so much with Lupin.
For a long time, yeah.
And I'm like, in the movie, it makes it just seem like he just is like, well, like, his comment, well, I mean, I knew he could do it well because I'd already done it. And it's like, yeah, but, like...
And, like, I like that line. It's kind of cheeky, but at the same time, it's like...
He's not that much of a natural.
No.
He has to freaking practice like any other kid.
Yeah.
And it's just because he's been thrust into situations where he's had to use magic to literally save his life that then he is able to pick up, I feel like, be able to do those spells because he has felt the pressure, but it's different. It's like, it's not just that he's thrust into these situations and he magically can do these spells perfect. It's that he, like, in the fourth one, he literally practiced like crazy because he was a 14-year-old kid thrust into the Goblet of Fire tournament.
Right,
and
he had no experience. And so, like, that's the other thing. I'm like, you're now seeing him with his classmates and teaching them in the next book. And you're like, oh, well, how did Harry learn these if none of these other kids have ever learned any of these spells yet? Like, not even in their Defense Against the Dark Arts classes.
Because, again, like, in the third one, does a lot of one-on-ones with Lupin.
Yeah.
Well, Lupin's the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. And so that's part of the reason why I think he's a leg up. And then in this fourth one, in the Goblet of Fire, he does a lot of time with Hermione and a lot of time by himself trying to learn spells so that he doesn't literally just die in the tournament.
It's, like, so interesting. That was one of the biggest, like...
It's true. I do think that's something that they did kind of wrong.
Like, going forward.
Throughout all the movies. Because, I mean, even then, like, when they get to the last ones, like, the last one you would expect them to have magic knowledge, right? You would expect them to be good at it. But in these, like, middle, like, ones, you're like, okay, where did he learn this?
It's just interesting, especially because in the next movie,
they
have a huge contrast between him and his classmates.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they can't do any spells at all when he starts teaching them. So I'm like, okay, that's...
And even with Hermione, which I'm like, Hermione's supposed to be the brightest witch, and I'm like...
And she knows like, quite a bit of this spells.
She can do a little bit, but, like, even then, I feel like they made that gap too big between him and everybody else.
Right, because in the book, she was helping train him for the Goblet of Fire.
Yeah.
And Ron. Don't forget about Ron. Don't forget about Ron, like the movies always forget about Ron.
They make him seem like such a jerk in this one, too. And I'm like, okay, some of the stuff he says, Ron in the book would never say that. Like, he does get mad and he does fight with Harry for a little bit. But, like, he's not straight up just, like, a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me so mad. They did movie Ron dirty so much.
Yeah, they just kind of...
I mean, I obviously still love him as a character. I love Ron. But, like, in the movies, they just, like...
It's just a disservice to him.
They make him seem like a jerk. They make him seem like he doesn't know very much magic. They make him seem like all this stuff. But he's actually pretty smart. It just doesn't come as natural to him as Harry.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wish they
would
have
the confidence to really do it, to be honest.
Yeah. I was thinking about this morning again as I was pre-gaming for our episode. They take away a ton of his lines that, like, are explaining wizard life and...
Right, because he's the knowledgeable one.
He's the one who grew up being
they
a wizard.
They always give those lines to Hermione in the movies.
And I'm like, Hermione's a muggle-born.
She doesn't know.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, sure, she's a know-it-all who reads a ton. But Ron has, like, the life experience. Like,
he has wizard parents who taught him.
Yeah, he would know a lot more about, like, some of just, like, the random things that maybe Hermione hasn't had a chance to read in a book yet.
Yeah.
So that just ticks me off.
No.
And it's ticking me off more and more as we go through this series.
When I read the books for the first time, I was like, what the heck? I'm like, I liked Ron before that in the movies, but him in the book is so much better.
Yeah.
Because of so many things. Oh, it just makes me a little crazy. Another thing, because this is the first time we see Voldemort, like, in full form. The only thing that they did different from the book to the movies, from the movies to whatever,
the most part,
is that he's supposed to have red eyes. But other than that, he's actually pretty book accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Which, he's
freaky.
Creepy. He looks
some people complain that he looks too human in the movies.
I have heard that.
Some people complain they don't like him being bald. But I'm like...
Yeah, but he's supposed to resemble kind of like a snake.
Right.
And so,
like, I think they did really well
he's still,
with him.
I feel like if they made him look more like a snake, like too unhuman-like, I feel like it would be a little... What's the word? It wouldn't be as inclusive to, like, multiple ages, because I feel like...
Right.
The point of Harry Potter is not supposed to be, like, an adult movie where it's, like, really scary and, like, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's supposed to be it was a YA book, and so it's supposed to be appropriate for younger kids too. He is still creepy, but he's not, like, totally terrifying. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they did a good balance. I do think it would have been cool if he had red eyes, but his white eyes are still kind of cool.
Yeah.
They're so creepy.
He does a phenomenal job. And I think, like, also, it's almost kind of nice that he appears to be somewhat human, because it's like, okay, even though he's done all this stuff and you can see that it's ruined him, he's not still, like, untouchable. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
He could still
We do get that great line now.
Still win.
Now I can touch you.
Yeah, which is a little bit different in the book. Again, some of the ways they, like, take the lines, use the lines, I like some better in the movie, but I like some better in the book.
Yeah.
I love dramatics, though. And this is a movie where we have the iconic, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? And I love that line in the movie.
But
and
if you notice, though, Dumbledore is so much more calm in the books.
I know. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about
Dumbledore? Here's the thing, though. So, the more we're reading the books again, I'm realizing how much more... Because I love Dumbledore in the movies. I really do. And I feel like you don't think of him as much of, like, doing anything bad to Harry. But honestly, in the books, Dumbledore kind of sucks, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, he just goes a little... He relies too much on Harry. He's relying so much on this kid and doesn't give him, like, really any information up until the very end. And I'm like, okay, you kind of just threw this kid in there just hoping that he'd survive.
Right.
Honestly, I like him and Snape both better in the movies. Because I hate Snape way more in the books, too. They do make him a lot more evil. And so, and, like, in the movies, I was like, oh, I love Snape. His arc is so great. In the books, he still sucks. So I feel like those are two characters that I'm like...
They did better in the movies, I think. I mean, you still get that feeling of, like, Dumbledore's kind of betrayed Harry in some way, especially with Snape and, like, you know, towards the end, he's like, you were raising him for slaughter and stuff, but I feel like you can see it in the movie more of, like why he's done it.
They give him more, like compassion? Like, you almost have more compassion for him in the movies than in the books. In the books, I was so annoyed. I was like, because later on when you find out a lot more about the prophecy and all those things, all the details, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me crazy. So, like, in this book / movie, I feel like was kind of, you see the difference more from what they changed from the book to the movie. I feel like they were trying harder to make Dumbledore more likable. A little bit.
And I think it kind of makes sense in the movie that he's, like, a bit more intense than they portrayed him in the book. I feel like it makes him more interesting. Well, I mean, he's been alive for several years. He's, like, you know...
Well, because in the book, like, he never yells. He's never, like, loud. Yeah. He's just very calm.
And I get that, like, makes it so that in the book, when there's the whole scene where he, like, yells towards the end at... I think, is it Barty Crouch? Yeah, I think it is. And Harry's like, oh, I see why now that this is the one man that Voldemort hates.
Yeah.
And you could say, like, oh, well, that scene in the movie doesn't hit the same. But you've already had enough that, like, you understand that, like, Dumbledore is not to be messed with.
No.
Like,
yeah,
he will go...
He's one tough MFer.
He will go to the bats for, like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And nobody messes with him. Mm-hmm. And you see that throughout all the movies, especially once we change into, I think, like, the third movie on, because the actor changes and he portrays him just so slightly different than the first two.
Yeah, Michael Gambon definitely goes in a more aggressive manner than...
But I feel like it's fitting. He was, like, a badass wizard. Mm-hmm. He's gonna fight, obviously.
He's been through it. He's been through a lot.
And I just, it's kind of nice. Like, yeah, no wonder Voldemort doesn't want to mess with him. Yeah. I mean, their fight in the next book,
iconic.
One of my favorite movie scenes ever.
Yes,
it's so good. And, like, just explains him to a T in my mind. Yeah. So I enjoyed that for the movie. Anyway, so yeah, they do change some of the words, who says what, how it's said, when it's said.
One thing
that's a given.
I had made note of, because how the movie and book starts is a little different. Mm-hmm. In the movie, you start off right off the bat with the housekeeper guy getting killed.
Yeah, and he's
in
like
the old Riddle house. But they don't ever explain it that is the old Riddle house. Like, that is the house where Tom Riddle's family was murdered. And that housekeeper guy, he was arrested for the murders. And then later on, he's taking care of it.
Right, because they couldn't figure out how they died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you start with, like, them explain, like, in the book, it starts with, like, explaining.
Like, you get a lot more of Tom Riddle's history.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is important, because then you kind of understand him more. I get that they can't put all of it in the movies, but, like, they could have put a little bit more. Because, like, just honestly, watching the movies, I never knew what that house was. Ever.
Really?
No, I didn't even know what it was. I was like, oh, this is just some house he's camping out in. And then that caretaker guy comes and gets killed.
I mean, I kind of put it together, because then once Harry arrives, he's like, you're standing on the bones of my father. And it's like...
Okay, well, at the end, so like, I didn't know that was the same place. Because, like, I had never read the book, so I had no context for that. Like,
I guess, yeah, I had a bit more, because I had read them at some point.
No,
and,
I didn't know.
Just watching it, you kind of just, like, assume after a while, but you do have to kind of just, like, piece it together yourself. And it's just a wild guess, I guess.
You know how many times, too, I've watched this movie, and it took me an embarrassing amount of times to realize that Karkaroff was the head of Durmstrang, was the guy that they were interrogating in that one scene.
Same. I never noticed that before.
Dude, for like so many times I watched the movie and I was like, why did they keep showing this guy? He's not even in the rest of the movie. And then I was like, embarrassing.
You're like, oh,
so embarrassing.
To be fair, he looks way different with the thing and
he does. And they never see his
cage.
Name.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things in this movie that I did not realize for the longest time. I had to watch it quite a few times in order to realize that he's the same guy, that house was the Riddle house.
We love rewatching movies because you pick up more every time you watch them.
And honestly, still to this day, if I watch these movies, I will pick up on something new, no matter what. That's what I love about movies.
Yeah.
Something else we were going to talk about was, like, in the beginning, like, they don't talk about the protection over Harry and things like that. But, like, they talk on it a little bit later on in the movie number 7, part 1.
Sort of.
Part 1. Kind of. But they don't explain it enough. And I know you wrote this down because you wanted to talk about it.
Well, because, like, in the book, Voldemort actually is the one who kind of explains that whole thing.
Yeah.
When they're in the graveyard, he's explaining basically where he's been, how he's been surviving, which is another difference. In the movie, you don't get nearly as much of that.
He kind of just hops from different animals in the dark forest. Till eventually gets to Quirrell and then things like that.
Right. He like kind of tells everything, and then he starts telling how this plan came about and how he knew he wanted Harry for the spell to bring him back to his body, but how does he get his hands on Harry? And he explains it like, well, as long as Dumbledore's made this old magic, I think is how he explains it.
Kind of.
He says he used some old magic, a very powerful spell, that as long as Harry is taken care of by his blood relatives and goes to visit with them, stay with them, he can't be touched there. Like, he's very well protected with the Dursleys.
Which is why he has to go live with them every summer in between school. He can't, like, go... Which, it is kind of sad, but I feel like it does make more sense why he really can't go live with Sirius, because technically, even though Sirius is in hiding, I feel like she could have just been like, oh, like, Harry just goes in hiding with Sirius while he's at, in the summertime. But, like, no, he has to go home to the Dursleys every summer so that
for
spell
a while.
Stays intact, because as long as Petunia is his caretaker, he's safe. He can't be touched when he's at home.
Yeah.
Like, he can't
Which was, like, a little... I don't know if I just took it weird in the book, But, like, Harry is literally listening to this whole explanation, and then at the end of the book, he's like, why do I have to go back with the Dursleys?
I mean, he's a kid,
and
so...
I know, and I'm like, Harry, you freaking idiot!
You
just almost died, and he explained to you that you're protected if you go and save the Dursleys. So that was something I kind of chuckled at, because I was
Harry
like,
can be a little cheeky
Harry, like,
but...
what the freak, dude?
But I do feel like that was kind of something that they skipped over, but I feel like it would have been it would have been good to have a little bit more context. They didn't need to explain the whole thing, but at least just say, like, oh, there's a spell Dumbledore set up, as long as you stay with the Dursleys, I can't touch you.
Yeah, and, like, they kind of touch on it, like we said later on, but I took it, like, from the movies, I kind of take it as, that's just, like, an every wizard thing that, like, they are protected at their homes
the only
until
thing they
they're
mentioned was the trace was on him, and once he turned 17, then the trace is gone, but it made it seem like the trace was, like...
what's protecting him from Voldemort?
But
yeah, that's kind of how I take it from the movie.
Part 7, Deathly Hallows Part 1 or whatever, movie 7, it just seems like the second that he turns 17, he is basically just going to be, like, open for grabs. But, like, it makes more sense when you know the context of, like, oh, you want the trace on him, but also... that's why he has to leave the house, because they can get to him at the house. Like, it makes more sense later on.
And it's no longer safe there.
So another plot hole that they could have, like, just touched on. Just, like, dip your toe into the water.
Bit.
Just, like, touch
just
on it
a bit, you know?
Some characters that they didn't have in the movie was Ludo Bagman and Winky, the elf.
Mm-hmm.
Ludo Bagman was actually kind of a big character in the book, which I'm surprised they cut him out of the movie.
Yeah,
I mean, like, I get it, they didn't want another character, but at the same time, it would have been better for a little, like,
it just, like, rounds it out, I guess.
Yeah, because, like, I don't remember his official title, but he's, like...
he's part of the ministry.
The ministry, but he's over, like, sports and things like that. So, like, he's involved in the Triwizard Tournament. Like, he announces stuff, and he's there, like, throughout the tournament, things like that.
You meet him at the beginning of the book, and he's through the remainder of the book for the most part.
Ludo Bagman, he's kind of an annoying character, but he's an important character, I feel like, in this book.
Well, and with him, you get the whole side storyline of with the Weasley twins. And, like,
they make a bet on the Quidditch World Cup. The Weasleys guess that the Irish will win, but Crumb will get the snitch. And they get it right, and he gives, he
gives them leprechaun gold, which disappears.
And so then they lose all their money, because they were going to open up the Weasleys Wizard Wheezes.
Yeah, so you see them, like, throughout this whole book kind of prepping to open up their shop.
Yeah.
And, like, going through the ups and downs with Ludo Bagman and, like, trying to get the money back, trying to blackmail him to giving it back. All these things. And he also bets on Harry because he's in trouble with the goblins. He owes him a ton of money, so he bets on Harry winning the Triwizard Tournament. And you see him several times trying to help Harry throughout the book, but Harry just doesn't, ever take his help.
I feel like they kind of took some of the things that he did and then gave them to Dumbledore and Moody, kind of, is what it seemed like to me.
Yeah, they just were like, we'll just disregard, because Dumbledore's the one who does all the announcing and everything like that for the most part, so.
Yeah. But Winky, the house elf, she is the house elf of the Crouches. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like they should have put her in there, because it would have made a little bit more sense. It would have filled in a couple plot holes. Well, I guess maybe not, though. Because, like, I mean, the way they did the whole attack at the Quidditch World Cup was so different from the book.
Yeah.
It was so different. And so, I mean, I get why they cut her out, but at the same time, they cut out all the house elves in this book. And this is the book where Hermione finds out that the house elves make the food at Hogwarts, and they're in the kitchen, and they work at Hogwarts. And she starts the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare.
Yeah, Spew.
And Spew is a part of the rest of the series, and they cut it out entirely.
Yeah, they just disregard it.
And I'm honestly kind of annoyed. I feel like if they make the TV show, they better freaking include Spew.
I know, I'm like, because you just decide it was, like, too boring of a side story?
I feel like it's so important, though, to Hermione's character.
Yeah.
And to show how different she thinks than even Ron and Harry, because Harry and Ron don't even fully understand why she's doing it. Like, they try to be supportive, but, like, I feel like since she is Muggle-born, and she doesn't have any magic in her family, even though Harry grew up, as a Muggle, I feel like it's different for him once he finds out he's a wizard, because then he feels connected to the wizard world through his family, through his parents. Hermione, I feel like, she still has that disconnect, and I feel like that shows when she's talking about the elves.
Yeah.
Because she's like, no, like, they should not be enslaved anywhere. Not even at Hogwarts. Like, really not with wizards and things like that. She's like, but, like, she gets so upset about them working at Hogwarts.
It's a huge plot.
She visits them. She is, like, fighting for their rights, like, for the rest of the series. And so I'm like, why did we cut this out?
Really
It's important to her character, I feel like, but that's just me.
Well, and, like, Winky is a good tool of foreshadowing throughout it because, you know, she is up in the stadium with them. You know, she's found with Harry's wand at the scene of the crime. Like, so many things, and they just disregard her.
Because she is working on behalf of the Crouches. They just totally disregard the whole fact that, like, she is involved.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have made some sense to have her in there because it could have filled in some
and it would have added more intrigue because they make it seem that Barty Crouch in the movie has no idea that his son's escaped, but really he's been in on it the whole time. In a way, like, he knows he's escaped. He helped him escape. He knows he's alive. He's been keeping him under the Imperious Curse for years to keep him under control. And, like, that's how this all comes about. So I'm like, they just changed it, and it just is, it's way different. It's weird.
It is. Which, talk about the Imperious Curse, this is a good time you mentioned that. So, there's a difference in the scene in the book and the movie when Moody is just demonstrating the unforgivable curses in class. And the main thing with the Imperious Curse is that he makes it seem like it's his wand movements.
In the movie.
But actually, it's vocal instructions. So, it'd be like, walk or like jump off a cliff.
Well, and like in the book, like the voice is like in their head almost.
Yeah, kind of. It's like,
so I'm like, anyways, it's just done so different. And so
in the movie, they make it seem a little bit more like simple.
Yeah,
but really, it's a little bit more complicated than that because the unforgivable curses are unforgivable for a reason. Like, it's not just like, because they make it seem more like Levi Corpus because he's just in the body.
Right,
so.
And in the book and in the movie, it's supposed to be like no one knew which witches and wizards were under the curse. And like several people were saying, oh, I was under the Imperious Curse. That's the only reason why I ever did anything bad. Mm-hmm. And then like in the movie, they don't portray it the same way. Because then it's like you just see someone with their wand doing things. And not only that, but then later on in the maze, Crumb is supposedly under the Imperious Curse.
But his eyes are all glassy and like glazed over. And it makes it seem like that's a symptom of being the Imperious Curse when it's not.
Which, again, would have been a noticeable feature. So, like...
It's just...
But I'm also confused, because in the movie, too, like, I never picked up on, like, he was supposed to be under the Imperious Curse.
To be honest.
I thought maybe he was, like...
hexed or, like under something different.
By the maze, and that maybe he went through, like,
that's
the weird fog or something. So I don't know if that's what they were trying to go for in the movie, or if it is. I don't know. That's just, like, a confusing plot point, once again.
Well, and then with Unforgivable Curses, let's continue to talk about this, because this is something, again... So in the book, first of all, Hermione says Avada Kedavra first. She actually says it. In the movie, they make her, like, she won't say it.
Like she won't say it, yeah, but she does.
She does. But then the last Unforgivable Curse, which honestly is something that I never knew watching the movies, ever. I always thought Neville's parents were dead. Okay? In the movies, they make it seem like his parents are dead to me.
They do.
And so I had no idea that his parents are alive. They're just at freaking...
like an insane asylum.
No, what's the name for the hospital? Anyways, I
can't remember.
Because they were under the... Not Imperious, not Avada Kedavra.
Crucio.
Yeah, Crucio. The Cruciatus
They were
curse.
put into terrible torture.
And they pretty much just, like, lost their minds. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just because I didn't pick up on it for forever, but I literally never knew that his parents were alive. I always thought they were dead. Yeah. Because they make it seem like they're dead.
They do,
because in the books, I can't remember, it's not in this book, but it's later on, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, or at least Harry and Ron, I think, go with Neville and meet his parents at some point. Mm-hmm. And, like, in this one, like, they talk about the torture and that Barty Crouch's son was in on it. It was, like, Barty Crouch, Bellatrix, and then 2 other people, because you get to see a little bit of that trial when Harry goes into the memory thing, whatever that's called. I can't remember now.
I can't think of it either.
And so they talk about a little bit more of the Longbottom's torture, because you find out that Barty Crouch's son was in on it, and that's probably the reason why he went to prison. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know, just another thing that I was like, well, that would have made more sense and a little more context, because...
Yeah, but they just kind of, again, ignore it. Well, that and Moody also, in the book, performs the curse on the kids. Like, not all of them, obviously.
Imperious Curse,
He does the Imperious Curse
and
on
Harry's
the kids.
the only one be able to fight it.
Yeah, and he's like, well, I'm going to teach you guys how to withstand it, which, to me, is also a bit of foreshadowing that, like, Moody is definitely suspicious.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, because then you see Harry fight the Imperious Curse later on in the graveyard when Voldemort performs it on him again.
Yeah.
So that's just another interesting point. And Harry gets like the Crucio curse put on him a couple times, and for some reason I never picked up on that watching the movie.
Well, I feel like you don't hear Voldemort say it
as well. He like Crucio. Does he not? I can't remember now.
No, I can't remember.
Because in the graveyard, he does in the book and in the
That's
movie.
why Harry's
he performs
like,
it.
Like he's like,
yeah. But for some reason, it didn't like click in my mind. Oh, that's a Crucio curse. I just like didn't like register it, I guess, up until now watching it. But I noticed that just barely, and I was like, oh,
this is why I feel like
poor Harry.
It does make sense to read the books because you know these things that they don't put in the movies, that, like, you know, the context. But that's why I'm like, if they're making a TV show, they better include some of this stuff. Because, like,
give us some more context.
True fans, we want to see it. I do want to see it. As much as I'm like, I love the originals. If they make a new one, I want to see all of the content. Yeah. Give me all of it.
That's the only way I'll accept it.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to talk about, this is just random. This is just because I'm a Ravenclaw.
Oh, yeah.
And I forgot this was even a thing. So, in the book, the Ravenclaw mascot is an eagle. And it's blue and bronze are the colors. Mm-hmm. And Raleigh named it Ravenclaw because she was using raven as a synonym for black. So technically it's Black Claw.
Which eagles have black claws.
Yeah. In the movie, Ravenclaw is blue and silver, and they did a raven mascot. And I'm like, okay.
Really?
Why did we change this? Because Gryffindor isn't a griffin, it's a freaking lion.
Yeah.
Slytherin, obviously, that one's a snake and whatever. And Hufflepuff is a badger.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why did we change Ravenclaws? I'm a proud Ravenclaw. I want it to be an eagle, but you can't find, like, anything with that symbol on it. They made them all ravens.
I wonder if maybe someone does make it out there.
I don't know. I doubt it. If anybody knows of anybody that makes Ravenclaw merch with an eagle on it, like true fans. Anyways.
Yeah, that is kind of an interesting thing.
Because we do get the first Ravenclaw characters with, like,
we
Cho
finally
and
meet
like
Cho in this book.
You get a little more Ravenclaw content. Finally. So, Rita Skeeter. So, she's different in the book and the movies, obviously, for many things. The main thing, though, that I wanted to note on, because she's annoying in both of them, but the whole thing that is funny to me, she's an unregistered animagus. Mm-hmm. And that is how she knows so much about what's going on with everybody. Right. Like, she exposes so many secrets throughout the book. In the movie, you don't see as much of that.
No, you don't really touch on it very much.
No, but, like, in the book, she's, like, constantly, like, she's writing about Harry and Hermione. Mm-hmm. She writes about Hagrid being half giant. She writes about all this stuff. And she only knows that because she's an unregistered animagus. And she transforms, isn't like a beetle, I think.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, Hermione actually captures her in her animagus form and keeps her in a jar, which is so funny to me. Like, Hermione is so unhinged for that. She literally just, like, entraps this lady in a jar. And, like, you talk about it again, like, the next book, I think. And, like, she keeps her in that jar for, like, a full year, I think, if I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, so she can learn to keep her quill to herself.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, Hermione is so crazy.
Just a bit.
This 14-year-old girl just, like, traps a beetle and is like, I'm gonna keep this girl in this jar.
She's like, well, I'll show you. She even at one point in the book vows that she will get revenge on Rita. So it's very funny that she does. But I did like in the book that you actually get a lot of foreshadowing for that. You hear, like, a bug buzzing and, like... Yeah,
it's cool. Like, you have, like, little moments and things like that.
Which,
they didn't do that at all.
I'm a sucker for foreshadowing.
I love things like that. Yeah. Like, you can pick up on them. I eat it up. I really do.
Okay, so, like, the last thing I think we should touch on, we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but at the end, when Mad Moody is revealed to be Barty Crouch...
Mad Moody. Why are you jumping
What did I say?
Mad Moody. It's bugging me. You even wrote it down over there. Mad Moody. It's Mad Eye Moody.
I don't know why I do these things. Anyways, Mad Eye Moody's reveal as Barty Crouch at the end is done a little bit differently than the book. In the book, he, like... Mad Eye Moody just tells Harry, like, he was the one who did everything, basically, because he doesn't want anyone else to get the credit for it. Mm-hmm. And and that's fine and dandy, and it makes sense for his character and whatever. You get a lot of information from the book. But I don't know what it is about the movie, but I love it when there's, like, many movies do this, and it's not, something new. But when there's, like, the slip of the words, and then the character realizes it from that... So you have, like, Mad Eye talking to Harry and asking him, like, were there others in the graveyard? And Harry goes...
I didn't mention the graveyard, Professor.
Yeah. And I'm a sucker for that type of, like,
reveal.
Oh, no
moment. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah, and so, like...
It's kind of cool.
I just enjoyed the movies, like, how Harry figures it out moment, just because it just itches something in my brain that just loves that stuff. Mm-hmm. But then in the book, you do get, like we said, the whole storyline. He tells them all this stuff. And then something else with Mad-Eye Moody and Harry is that earlier on in the book, when Harry finally takes Cedric's advice with the egg and he goes in like the middle of the night.
There's like a whole cut scene that they don't even, he goes like in the middle of the night.
And he's coming back down the stairs and falls through a trip stair and like gets stuck.
And he's under the invisibility cloak.
And he drops the egg and the map, and he's still under the invisibility cloak, but the map and the egg are too far for him to reach. And the egg was so loud that it makes Snape come and Filch, and they're like almost about to find Harry, and then Mad-Eye Moody comes. He notices the map. He takes it right before Snape can see it. He sees that Harry's there. Obviously, he can also see Harry because his eye can see the invisibility cloak. But what's interesting about that scene is that after he gets Snape and Filch to leave and he's talking to Harry, Harry's like, oh yeah, this map shows everybody, and I saw Barty Crouch like
Wasn't
breaking
he sick?
in. Yeah, he's like super sick.
Little Bagman had come to replace him in his portion of the games that
Percy. Which we haven't even touched on the fact that Percy's like not in this movie at all.
Percy's in this book a lot too.
We'll get to that in just a second. But he's like, oh, I saw Barty Crouch, which I was really confused about because I thought he's so sick, like he's not even coming to the games, but he just broke into Snape's office. And that was actually Mad-Eye Moody because Harry at that point doesn't know that Barty Crouch has the same name.
Through Polyjuice Potion. Like it will, like, I mean, it's like we know in the last one it sees through Animagi too because it pointed out Peter Pettigrew.
Right.
So
yeah, so I was like, that was kind of a foreshadowing moment being like, oh, Barty Crouch, and obviously it's Barty Crouch Jr., not the older Barty Crouch, and Mad-Eye Moody is Barty Crouch Jr., so he takes the map from him because he doesn't want Harry to figure out that was him, and then he also uses it to his own devices while he's there. But yeah, Percy was in this book a lot.
And I feel like this is the beginning that you see Percy be very different from the rest of his family, because it happens again in the next one too. He's very involved in the ministry, and he gets very kind of like caught up in the whole, it's almost like he's like caught up in the politics kind of like the ministry, and so which is just kind of, it's interesting. I do think it's kind of a cool story arc to see him very different from the rest of his family,
right? Because
like in, I can't remember if it's the next one or the one after that, he like doesn't come home for a while. Like he doesn't even have his family. He basically disowns them kind of, and so this is kind of the beginning of that. I feel like where you see him branch off,
right? But like in the movie, he's not in this movie. Nope. He's not really in the next movie.
You don't see him again, and in the next one. You see him in the next one.
Do you?
Yeah.
He's like so disregarded. Yeah. I'm like, I don't really remember him. He doesn't stand out to me like at all from the movies.
Nope.
So that was kind of an interesting storyline. Like he replaces Crouch at a ton of stuff and was helping with the ministry and was like his assistant. And meanwhile, Crouch is now under the Imperious curse from his son because his son broke off of his and now is like using him. There's like a whole thing that they just ignore altogether. And we could dive deeper into it and explain.
But that's kind of, that's the most of them. This one, there's quite a few differences. We didn't talk about, they changed some of the stuff in the games. They overcomplicated some things. But, I feel like they did that just to make it more entertaining. But, so I get it. But, if you haven't read the book, I highly suggest reading this book. If you are a fan of the movies, like, I do love this movie still, obviously.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of plot holes that they could have made a little bit more seamless.
Had they included just a few more things.
They didn't need to include all of them because some of them would have gotten too complicated. But like a few more things. Or if you're a really big fan of the book and movies and you agree with any of these things, like let us know. Because I do think it's interesting to talk about it. Because I'm like, why did they change certain things? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? So I don't know.
Oh, just one last thing. In the book.
What?
In the book, they don't make as big of a deal of Cedric's death. And in the movie, you have the very iconic and one of my favorite to quote lines, the whole, my boy, that's my boy.
Yeah, his dad.
And that's not in the book.
No.
Which I found interesting. I get it. They always over-dramatize things for the movies. But I love that part in the movie. In fact, when I was watching it this week, I was like crying. I was like, oh my gosh, Cedric. And he's just like, that's my boy. I just love that part for some reason.
You do love that part.
I quote that one all the time.
All the time.
Which is interesting.
So
interesting.
Funny. So random.
To quote.
She'll do it random times too. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Anyways. that's it. We'll wrap that up for today here.
Come
we
back
still
in a little
have
bit in the next couple weeks for the Order of the Phoenix. Like I said, we're getting to the thicker books, so a lot more content to go over. But we're getting to the part of the series where we're getting closer to my favorite movie. So
yeah, it just gets more and more fun each time, I feel like.
Well, like, as they get older, like more stuff happens, and I just feel like it gets so exciting. And now that Voldemort is back,
He's back.
You obviously get a lot more of that content too. So, and as usual, we're on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, everywhere, YouTube, things like that.
Yep,
So
I'll link down below. You can pretty much find us anywhere.
Yeah.
And if there's somewhere you can't find us, let us know and I'll make it so that you can.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.